Good morning, everybody. Good morning to our members, our speakers, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Orr. I'm the president of the British Chamber of Commerce, UK, based here in Casablanca. So thank you for your participation in this new webinar dedicated this Thursday to renewable energy and green hydrogen potential and opportunities in Morocco and how to increase post-Brexit bilateral relations between Morocco and the United Kingdom in this sector. In fact, the development of renewable energies is at the heart of the national energy policy since 2009. Morocco has developed an ambitious renewable energy programme aimed at increasing the share of renewable energies in the national energy network to 42% by 2021 and 52% by 2030. Morocco is now a leader in the renewable energy sector, both in North Africa and on the African continent as a whole. Thanks to its privileged geographic location with access to the Mediterranean and a very long coastline on the Atlantic, the Kingdom is well equipped to fulfill its ambition of becoming a true energy hub. Energy efficiency, along with the development of renewable energy, is a priority of the National Energy Strategy. The aim is to save 12% of energy consumption by 2021 and 15% by 2030. With this in mind, action plans for energy efficiency are implemented in all key sectors, particularly transport, industry and construction. Given the huge potential for renewable energy, solar and wind, available to Morocco, the building of a diversified energy mix benefiting renewable energy has been planned in order to satisfy growing electricity demand, preserve the environment and reduce dependence on energy from other countries. To meet these challenges, Morocco has launched a very large-scale integrated programme for producing electricity from renewable energy sources. This is one of the largest projects in the world, aiming at a total capacity of 4,000 megawatts by 2020, thanks to the construction of new wind farms and the construction of 5 solar power plants. This integrated and structured project is a lever for economic and human development, competitiveness, training, research and development, subcontracting, industrial integration. The fulfillment of these projects is an opportunity to generate and develop an industry around renewable energy and energy efficiency to support these programs and maximize socio-economic benefits. To have a better understanding of this subject, eminent speakers are with us this morning. Mr. Saïd Moulin, General Manager at the Moroccan Agency for Energy Efficiency, who will give us a global overview about the vision of Morocco in renewable energy and green hydrogen and potentialities in Morocco and what it is the next level to achieve as a country focused on renewables. Thank you for being with us today, Mr. Moulin. We also thank Mr. Joshua Lawrence, Hydrogen and Low Carbon Heating Advisor at the UK Department for International Trade, who will help us understand the strategy in the UK around renewable energy and how can the UK become a main partner to Morocco regarding the green hydrogen. Finally, our thanks to Mr. Malik Anabi, General Manager of Windhouse Morocco, who will highlight to us the success story of a UK company in Morocco on renewables and what are the future development in this sector. This webinar is also yours. Do not hesitate to write to us with your questions via the platform, and please remember that our Chamber aim is to increase the exchange between the two countries, and we'll be pleased to support and help any UK company who wants to develop its activity in Morocco and Africa. Before handing over to our friend and partner in this webinar, Mr. Daniel Kat, Her Majesty's Consul General of the United Kingdom and Director of DIT in Morocco, that we thank deeply for accepting to make this moderation. I would like to thank our local partners, OCP Group, BMCE, Bank of Africa, Spirit Aerosystems, Maroclear, Consumar and CIH Bank for their continued support. Please have a good webinar, everyone, and I'll hand you over to Dan. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and good morning to those of you in Morocco, and good afternoon, I think, to those of you in the UK. Let me also say Ramadan Mubarak to anyone celebrating this month. As Stephen said, my name is Dan Catte and I'm the British Consul General here in Casablanca, and I'm also head up the international trade team here, so attached to the UK's Department for International Trade. And we're very much like BritJam, our remit is to increase trade and investment between the UK and Morocco. And look, I think it's a really exciting time for us to be doing this, with the UK post-Brexit as an independent trading nation, with the entry into effect on the 1st of January this year of the UK-Morocco Association Agreement, which is our free trade agreement that we have between the UK and Morocco, and which I'm sure will be a fantastic platform on which to boost our trade ties and our economic relations more widely with Morocco. So it's great to be here and to have so many of you online. And thanks first also to our friends at Britcham and their sponsors for putting on what I'm sure will be a really interesting webinar. As Stephen has introduced, we've got some great speakers lined up, and I also want to add my welcome and thanks to Saeed, Josh and Malik for joining us today. They're going to be talking about renewable energy, and I hope drilling down a bit into green hydrogen specifically. So we'll hear from them, and then at the end there'll be a time for a Q&A, and we'll put some of your questions to the panel. Thanks to those of you who have been able to submit questions in advance. But as Stephen says, please continue to send them through, and we'll endeavour to get through as many as we can. So look, just before we kick off and I hand over to our first panelist, I wanted to say a few words on behalf of the British government about why we think this is such an important and exciting area of work, and particularly here in Morocco. And you know, I think Morocco and the UK are really well positioned to work together on this. Both of our countries, and actually more specifically, I would say our businesses and our private sectors have significant expertise and experience in renewables and renewable energy to share. And I think it's fantastic that Morocco's aim to reach 52% renewable energy by 2030 is matched in its level of ambition by the UK's commitment to bring emissions to net zero by 2050. And you may have seen that in the UK we set ourselves a new target just this week, to reduce emissions by 78% by 2035 when you compare that back to the levels as they were in 1990. And of course, I'd be remiss of me not to mention the fact that the UK is hosting the UN's Climate Change Conference this year, or COP26, up in Glasgow in Scotland. And as part of that, we want to be working really closely with businesses such as yours on initiatives like Race to Zero, which is encouraging the private sector to make emission reduction commitments in line with those made by governments. And of course, Morocco itself hosted the Climate Change Conference back in 2016 in Marrakesh, COP22. So we have much to learn from Morocco, and I know we'll be working really closely with our friends here to continue to raise the bar in terms of tackling climate change, both in the run-up to COP26, but also beyond. But really, at the end of the day, it's the pioneering businesses, it's the new technologies, and it's the green innovation that we see so much of both here in Morocco and back in the UK that will drive progress in this area, and that will lay the foundations for economic growth and job creation that I think we all want to see. And you don't need me to tell you this, but I'll tell you anyway that clean growth presents really the most significant economic growth opportunity of the 21st century. The cost of renewables and other low carbon technology has fallen far quicker than we anticipated. Solar and wind are already cheaper than coal power in 2/3 of the world, predicted to undercut commissioned coal and gas almost everywhere by 2030. Global trade in low carbon goods and services expected to grow from, I think, around 150 billion pounds in 2015 to up to 5 trillion pounds in 2050. So it seems to me that the more we as governments can help businesses collaborate more, the better chance of success we'll have. And as Stephen says, that's one of the main reasons we're here today, to try and support the private sector in identifying opportunities and partnerships in this area in the renewables sector. So I hope you find the webinar useful. please don't hesitate to get in touch with us or BritCham if you'd like to discuss further, if there are any opportunities or connections you think you might want to pursue afterwards. So let me stop there. And without further ado, introduce our first speaker, Mr. Saeed Moulin, who's the General Manager of the Moroccan Agency for Energy Efficiency. Over to you, Saeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Consul General, Mr. Kate, and it's a great pleasure. And I would like to, first of all, to thank the BritCham for organizing this event, especially right now at this time, because, you know, as you have many discussions today about how climate change can be also with this new approach all over the world today, with strong proactive policies all over the world. I'm very glad also because, as you know, during this pandemic, all actors were looking for two axes to have a recovery. One dedicated to digital economy, the other one to the green economy. And we are exactly in this field today involved in the green economy. And what is new today, and as it was mentioned by the president of the BritCham, I would like to thank him because, yes, we had many discussions on how decarbonization can be important for the industry in Morocco, or the role of the private sector. I was in charge of the public-private partnership during the COP22 in Marrakesh, and the role of the private sector is a key for all the actions that even when governments have the will, we need to have the role of the private sector really clear, and also with the legislation allowing that. It's very important. So to start with an overview about the vision of the kingdom, we had the chance in Morocco that at the highest level of state, there is a strong political will for sustainable development for all sectors, not only for the energy sector, but for all sectors. And that's the first point, a strong proactive policy at the highest level of state. Then we had, as it was mentioned, we had this in 2009, this event on the strategy of energy. And it was decided at this time to give priority to renewable energy and energy efficiency in our energy policy. Morocco is not a big emitter of greenhouse gas, but we decided to have this strong proactive policy because we are looking not about some projects, but about a strategy. A strategy with objective to reach, it was mentioned, 52% of the renewable energy capacity in 2030, 20% of energy efficiency in industry, transport, housing, agriculture, cities in 2030 also. So with objective to reach, with dedicated agencies. Mazen is in charge of the big project in the country, but AME is also in charge of energy efficiency today. But since few months, since just 1 year now, the missions of AME has been extended to include the development of sustainable mobility and clean industrial production. It's important, of course, beside the historic mission of energy efficiency. The agency is now under the supervision of the Ministry of Industry, Trade, Green and Digital Economy. The kingdom has a department, ministerial department dedicated to the green economy. It's very important to look at, we can protect the environment, we can have a strategy for energy, but we can look at all this green economy, how it has to be developed, how we can have all the jobs. It was mentioned in the discussion in the beginning. Many jobs can be developed in this field today, and it's really new opportunity for the young people in the whole region. We are working, of course, for decarbonizing the industry. As it was mentioned, you know, Morocco is porting industry will have to adapt the upcoming mechanism at the borders that will be put in place by many countries, especially Europe. And we know that this discussion today on how many industries that are exporting today should look really seriously at how to decarbonize the process. And there is huge opportunity in Morocco. Why? Because we have high renewable potential and a very economic renewable energy potential. It's very important. We are reaching the lowest price in the wind sector we are also having what happened in these 10 years. We saw how the price of solar energy is becoming cheaper and cheaper. That's a key. We can decarbonize and decrease the energy bill for the industry, for all the customers, but also for the country. So with this strong political support, with this high renewable potential, with these institutions, dedicated agencies, and also the successful deployment of renewables, as I mentioned, since 10 years now, we have many projects already under production, and they are really economic. Of course, we know the debate today. You can have some plants that are quite expensive but running at night, and you can have a lot of plants that are very, very economic, and the total economy of the renewable can be really a solution for the next step. And so we are going to continue and to accelerate our renewable energy program. One thing also is linked to R&D. We have the chance today, when we have the strategy, to look all the agencies, all the implementations, but also to look at the whole role for R&D and the role of universities, of an institute dedicated to that, IRESEN, and also the role of the private sector in this R&D. And that's why we have many projects today underway, developed between private sector, universities, and different actors. It's a chance to look at that and to look at how the sector can be developed also in our country, and to look at all the possibility of new technologies developed with partners in this country. Another point is linked to the financing. How to attract green financing in this field. It is very important. We had many debates during the COP. How southern country not emitting the greenhouse gas, but suffering from the greenhouse gas, can also be actor in this field. What is the role of the green financing? And it's a key. It's not the southern countries that should pay for the surplus linked to those new technologies. The role of the green financing should, and what we have discussed and decided during the COP, during the last 10 years, how the financial support can be for the southern countries. And we think a lot of work has to be done still. And I hope in the next COP, this support, some financial support, specifically for countries that are proactive in this field. Southern countries that are proactive, have strong proactive policies in this field, should be more supported than the others. It's very important to look at that. When you have the policy, when you have the institutions, when you have the regulation and the legislation, it's very important. At the same time, we decided to have a law for renewable energy that allow to open the market a little bit. We should look more for that, but also to develop a law for energy efficiency. And that's what we are doing right now. And we have many regulations on the field of energy efficiency in housing, for example. When you have to build a building, you need to have some rules for that, efficient rules for that. When you are looking for importing any products that is consuming energy, it has to have some norms for that. So all that point has to be developed. And that's why we're doing as AME. The second point is also to be coherent in our policy. We stop subsidizing fossil fuel. It is very important when you have a strategy for renewable energy and energy efficiency, to be coherent. And you need to have this approach with stopping the subsidies of fossil fuel. We have a program for farmers to help them to switch from diesel pump to solar pumps. And because we stopped subsidizing diesel, because of the price decrease of solar PV, the payback for solar pump from 10 years to 5 years to 4 or 5 years today for farmers. So when you have a coherent policy, you can have really a market, and that's how we have more than 40,000 farmers today using solar pumps. It's more than 400 megawatt are today in a decentralized way. One thing also is you need to put some incentives to help the actors to develop that. For the solar pumps, for example, with the Crédit Agricole du Maroc, a bank dedicated to the agricultural sector, they have a loan today dedicated to solar pumping. But also, we developed with the Maroc PME a program called Tatouir Vert, Green Tatouir. It's for SMEs that they want to decarbonize, they want to decrease the energy bill, they want to use renewable energy, they want to have energy efficiency program, they want to have water resources program, and or circular economy. All those sectors can be financed, also part of it, with sometimes 30% of subsidies in the investment from this program. So when you have the policy, when you have the regulation, when you have the institutions, when you have the incentives, the policy and the financial incentives, you can reach many projects. And that's how we developed many projects with Tatouir, but also what we had a few years ago with the MORCEF, the Moroccan Sustainable Energy Financial Facility, with EBRD, with local banks, for any investor in the sector who would like to have a program for decreasing its energy bill, or to have more energy efficiency project, they can have access to loan and with 10% subsidy. So when you have all that, you can reach our project, our program, and our objectives, and we can have also a visibility for the next step. Another point, we are looking also for the new approach, and we were having discussion with different actors, not only in this continent, but even in Australia, and to look how today, because they have a lot of opportunities, Australia is looking to export green electricity to Singapore, 4,800 kilometers. Can you imagine the Kingdom of Morocco with this high potential of renewable, very cheap renewable energy today in this country, because we have this very good wind regime, because we have this solar radiation, and the link between Morocco and Europe, but also, I hope one day, between Morocco and UK. And it will be actually, and you can, if you do the calculation, when you know the price of renewable energy here in this country, how you can have completely economic project to export green electricity from Morocco to many countries in the region. Another point, and of course we can think about it, but it is also the one of the point of this webinar about hydrogen. Yes, that's the point concerning hydrogen is very important, because we believe as a very energy dependent country, Morocco is, well, this last 20 years was more than 90% energy dependent, importing oil, importing coal, importing natural gas. With this new opportunity of producing green hydrogen, there is a huge opportunity. Why? Because today you have the chance not only to have this high renewable energy potential, but to convert this high renewable energy potential into a new vector of energy, which is green hydrogen. This hydrogen sector represents an opportunity for many countries, of course, to accelerate the energy transition and drastically reduce the emissions. Indeed, producing green molecules, hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, synthetic fuels, from renewable electricity allows to decarbonize in a holistic way different sectors in the economy, transport, construction, and industry as a whole. We believe that it huge opportunities here. Green hydrogen, and also when we had a discussion with different actors in this field, because we know how to use hydrogen in many countries. We know how we have some pipelines of hydrogen in different countries in the world. We know how to transport it. We have to have some rules for that. We have to have some regulation for that, definitely. And that's why we decided to have this cluster for green hydrogen developed in this country with many actors from the public sector and from the private sector. Together, we are working in different actions, and we are pushing for having to look at actually many points in this project, to look at the domestic market development, to look at the cost reduction throughout the value chain of green hydrogen and its derivatives, the creation of a Moroccan and regional pole of research and innovation. There is still R&D in this field. We are not completely in economic way today comparing to gray hydrogen. There is a lot of things to do, but we are looking at what is going on in all over the world and in many countries, also the support for green hydrogen today, and not only for transport or for industry, but also to use it as new vector of energy in the future. Of course, we are looking in this cluster to look at all the local content that can be developed in this country. As you know, I didn't mention that, the industry today in our energy strategy, we have the chance today for the wind sector, for example. More than 70% of the spare parts are produced here in Morocco. The last factory of the wind blades factory in Tangier, it's really a success story. This factory today is exporting all over the world, even in Europe. And today, to show that when you have a strategy, you can have all the actions, but also you can have all the ecosystem linked to renewable energy developed in the country. That's what the Kingdom of Morocco did. And this is how we are really pushing for that for all sectors, and of course, for the hydrogen sector also. It's also one point, because we will look at how the funding of such project can be done. Maybe we have the chance today because in Morocco we have already all those opportunities, but we should look, and because we have this maritime and gas connectivity with EU, because we have already some and this strong proximity, we can think about how the involvement of the industry and the private sector can play a role, but in a with a regulation that allows it. All the application, and we have the chance in Morocco, as you know, in the kingdom, we have the leading world company for fertilizers, OCP, and OCP has a strong commitment for the environment, and they are looking to be carbon neutral in 2040. It's very important to look at how world leading company today, they have a strategy for energy, a strategy for water, for circular economy, and also for greenhouse gas emissions, and of course, how they can have more and more products decarbonized. And I think, in my opinion, that the first big project for hydrogen in Morocco will be the one linked to the green ammonia. And instead of importing ammonia, Morocco can start producing its own green ammonia instead of importing it, and also in an economic way, and helping the decarbonization of the OCP group. So all those points can be developed, and I think because we know how actors are already in this field really starting projects, and that's why I believe that's the first point. And the second point will be to export this green hydrogen and to look at how with actors in different regions, and I hope also knowing UK involvement in this new approach for decarbonization, it's really, really important to look at how we can have many projects, opportunities in this field, in the field of renewable energy and hydrogen. Well, maybe I will stop here about all the overview of what we are doing, what we are having in this country, and I can assure you, and because we have this strong proactive political support at the highest level of the state. And the King's letter was very clear. 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, priority to renewable energy and energy efficiency in our energy policy. We have the chance today that all those projects, all those opportunities can be developed with partnerships. And of course, I'm sure, and thank you for the BridgeChamp for organizing this webinar, because many opportunities can be here for the next generations, but also creating jobs in the north, but in the south also of as opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mullion. That's really fascinating to hear, and I know some of the follow-up questions that we've got will probe you a bit more on some of the topics that you've raised there. So hope we can come back to you later for some follow-up questions on that. But thank you for now. Maybe I can hand over to one of my colleagues from the Department for International Trade in the UK now. Josh, over to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Daniel. Could I have my slide decks on the screen? There we go. Thank you. So, hi everybody. Thank you, Mr. Saeed, for your presentation. My name is Josh Lawrence. I work at the UK Department for International Trade, based in the UK in London. Although, as you can see, I'm working from my home office at the moment because of the restrictions. I'm very glad to be here today. DIT, as I hope you realise, has a central role in promoting renewable energy trade and investment between the UK and other countries, including, of course, Morocco. And I sit within DIT's renewable energy team. And the sectors that I focus on in particular are hydrogen and low carbon heating. So those are the sectors where the majority of my knowledge is. But I recognise that Morocco, and we've just heard that Morocco has amazing capacity and potential across a whole range of renewables, hydrogen, solar, wind energy, and so there's lots of exciting possibilities there. In my role at DIT, I have a number of there are a number of forums that I sit on, which inform what I have to say today. You may or may not be aware the UK has a Hydrogen Advisory Council set up to help the government form its hydrogen strategy, which will be coming later this year, and I sit on that. So I get to hear from leading private sector institutions what they think the government should do in terms of developing a hydrogen strategy, and some interesting private sector perspectives on that. And I work closely with BEIS, the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department in the UK, also feeding in DIT perspectives, international trade perspectives on hydrogen development. So I would like to share some of that with you today. I'm going to do my best to relate that to what Morocco is trying to do. And what I will do is I'll give you a flavour of what the UK is doing from a policy perspective, what sort of projects are going on in the UK which might be relevant and have capabilities relevant to what Morocco wants to do, and to show you some specific projects that are happening in the UK, and also some of the end use demand capabilities being developed, which of course is what's going to drive the demand for production of hydrogen. So yeah, it's really great to hear about Morocco's ambitions so far. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So the UK also has significant ambitions when it comes to hydrogen, and with this slide, I'll just set that out for context. We have what's called the UK Committee on Climate Change. Every 5 years, they do a report and a carbon budget, it's called, which is presented to government to say this is what needs to happen for us to reach our net zero commitments by 2050. And as you might have seen in the news recently, that is probably going to be brought forward even earlier. So really ambitious program here, a very challenging program to achieve that. And the Climate Change Committee tells us what needs to happen, or and hydrogen forms a key part of that. So in the recent 6th carbon budget, in the balanced pathway, which is where if everything goes according to plan, consumers change their behaviours, government puts in place the right incentives and regulation, then we see at least 90 terawatt hours of hydrogen being needed by 2030, produced from both electricity or green hydrogen and from natural gas with carbon capture, which is blue hydrogen. All sorts of applications are called out: shipping, industry, intermittency in the power grid, building heating, and there are some specific applications if we can convert our gas grid, for example, hydrogen boilers, etc. Because gas boilers are being phased out by 2028, or sorry, oil and gas by 2028 and 2033 respectively. So the UK could be a big market for for Moroccan green hydrogen. In the headwind scenario, which is where things don't go according to plan, then UK demand for UK will be even more reliant on hydrogen by 2050 if we don't decarbonise and electrify our systems as much as we hope to do. If we don't deploy offshore wind as much as we hope to, then we'll be even more reliant on hydrogen and even more reliant on blue hydrogen in the interim, and we'll come on to that. So it's a complex environment, but the UK sees hydrogen being a part of that, and there's a lot of scope there for UK and Morocco to work together in this area. Next slide, please. So what's the environment like? Well, I mean, there's a lot of talk about hydrogen, a lot of ambitions in hydrogen, but it is still a nascent sector in many ways for renewable energy. Obviously, it's been used for chemicals, and ammonia has been produced for farming for many years, but costs need to come down, technology needs to develop, and so I think if you sift through all of the big, bold hydrogen strategies that are being published by countries in Europe and around the world, and look at the fundamentals of industry, then the UK has a strong position there, which I hope we can work with Morocco to utilise. Across all renewables, so the UK is #1 in Europe for being most attractive for renewable energy investment. There's more than a dozen large-scale hydrogen projects either ongoing or set to start in the coming years. The UK has some really interesting stuff going on with hydrogen fuel cells for the downstream uses. We're consistently at the top of the patents for technology, the patent rates for hydrogen technology. We have some big aims, which we'll come on to in more detail, but are equivalent to other countries, like 5 gigawatts of low carbon hydrogen by 2030. To Mr. Saeed's point about private sector role in this, we're very much aligned with that. The UK government sees the private sector taking a leading role in developing this, unlike other countries, and the business models that the UK is developing will look to stimulate private sector investment. So I think there's some good alignment there. And the first tranche of that is the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund, which, although only 240 million, will stimulate up to around 4 billion of private sector investment is the aim. So next slide, please. And as I said, whilst hydrogen's established, it was a British person, Henry Cavendish, who first discovered hydrogen many years ago. In the renewable energy space, it's fast moving from a relatively low base at the moment. But so what's important is having those foundational capabilities, like Morocco does, like the UK does, with offshore wind, which can be used to power the electrolyzers, with oil and gas industries, where it can be used for application in blue hydrogen, etc. Establish grid technology to help use that hydrogen to balance grid intermittency, etc. So the UK at the moment is producing around 27 terawatt hours production per year. A lot of that's coming from SMR, steam methane reformation, which is of course the technology for blue hydrogen. And it's clear there's a big role for blue hydrogen in the interim, while green hydrogen technology is advancing and the cost of that is coming down. And that's very much the role that the UK is taking, the path that the UK is taking. If we could move to the next slide, please. So just to give you a flavour of the policy side of things, what's happened. Again, I say again, there's a lot of national hydrogen strategies which have been published. I think the German one committed a number of billions, etc. But actually, sometimes there's not so much detail underneath those in terms of what will happen and how that pathway will be realized. And that's what the UK is trying to do differently. We're trying to have a really evidence-based, industry-informed pathway to hydrogen capabilities, a hydrogen economy. And to that extent, the UK has been doing a lot in hydrogen, albeit not under the banner of a hydrogen strategy. It doesn't mean nothing's been happening. And so if you're interested, you can see that the Business Energy Department, BEIS, has launched a low carbon hydrogen supply competition a number of years ago, looking at piloting various methods, including green hydrogen production, blue hydrogen production, etc., at scale, and how those can be developed into larger scale projects and capabilities. I'll come on to that in a little while. We've got an industrial decarbonisation challenge fund, which is another key aspect of how we're going to decarbonise industry, and some of that will be looking at ways that hydrogen industry can use hydrogen to decarbonise. Because the UK is taking a twin track approach, stimulating both green and blue hydrogen production and demand. Obviously, blue hydrogen is a part of that, therefore, so carbon capture is something that needs to be developed. And just last year, the Prime Minister launched his 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution. And one of the key points within that was low carbon hydrogen target of 5 gigawatts by 2030. There's an industrial decarbonisation strategy. The hydrogen strategy will be coming mid-year this year. And then we will finalise the business models, which again is linking back to that point about private sector involvement. The UK is not the sort of place which issues massive grants for development. It's seen as a more targeted way to sort of have some business models which stimulate private sector development within the industry, and I can give you a bit more information about those shortly. Daniel, please keep me on check for time if I'm overrunning. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the 10-point plan. I won't go through it in too much, but there's a 5 gigawatt target by 2030 as production. It's a twin track approach, both blue and green, because it's seen in the UK that green is the ultimate goal. It's what we want to do. We want to produce green hydrogen. We want to buy and use green hydrogen. We will have a lot of demand for green hydrogen by 2050. I'm sure some of that will be coming from Morocco. But in the interim, before the price of that comes down, the UK has some geology which makes blue hydrogen advantageous in the short term. If we can capture carbon when producing blue hydrogen and capturing the carbon dioxide, we have sort of fairly vast undersea natural gas caverns, which could be natural gas fields which are now empty, which can be used to store that CO2. And since industry is going to have to decarbonise, it seems like a good bet to do that. But we're very much looking at both green and blue hydrogen, different from some other economies. You might have seen, though, a few months ago, the European Parliament changed direction on this. They initially embarked only on green hydrogen, but then said actually they do see a bridging role for blue hydrogen in the interim, and that makes sense because if the UK can have blue hydrogen a bit sooner, then it means we can start to stimulate the demand, the cars and the vehicles, etc., which will then later rely on the green hydrogen that will be produced. So anyway, there's various milestones in this 10-point plan towards this target. We're looking at sort of a large village which is heated by hydrogen, and then a hydrogen town by 2025, and blending in the gas grid, etc., etc. So next slide, please. So business models. The UK government published a research paper on this last year. It's publicly available on the Gov website if you're interested. Maybe some of these are relevant to Morocco as well. These are not the decided business models. These are a range of business models which are going to be consulted on this year, and then the government will publish its preferred business models next year. But they could be anything, and there's a recognition that there need to be business models to stimulate production, to stimulate distribution and storage, and then also the demand side, the consumption side. And those could be contractual, via some sort of contract for difference mechanism. There could be regulated returns to sort of help mitigate the risk that you might not have any demand for the hydrogen up front, or you may have too much supply or something. There could be obligations on polluting industries to embrace some of embrace hydrogen production and usage, and end user subsidies. So those end user subsidies could require polluters to use hydrogen as a certain. It could require a number of, say, hydrogen powered cars or something, and fuel stations, and subsidize the use so that it becomes more attractive to build up that demand. Next slide, please. So I guess at this stage, I'll just move on to some of the projects, and what I hope this might bring you is a flavour for some of the green hydrogen work that's happening in the UK, which again will show you some of the companies that are involved who might be interested in partnering with Moroccan companies towards Moroccan ambitions towards green hydrogen production and renewable energy projects. So start with the pipeline. You've got where we are today with where we are going to be in the future. In terms of planned projects, and even this is a little bit out of date. This is based on 2020 data, but you can see that the number of projects is ramping up quickly. The size of those projects is ramping up, and there's a lot of potential for hydrogen production. And I guess what's interesting in the discourse in the UK is that really many people anticipate a mixed model. They anticipate that there'll be some distributed production of hydrogen in the forecourts, perhaps, of fuel stations. There may be some large-scale production through blue hydrogen in the industrial clusters where it makes sense, where it's close to energy and ports. And there will probably be some, and there will almost certainly be some import of hydrogen as well from countries like Morocco, who are able to produce it extremely cheaply through your vast solar and wind capabilities. So it's going to be interesting to see how that develops in the coming years, how the balance of those large production facilities, those large imports and worldwide distribution develop, and how the small forecourt or town-based electrolyzers might develop as well for local needs. So lots of opportunity there. Next slide, please. I mentioned earlier that the Business and Energy Department has been supporting through funds some interesting R&D and pilot projects for low carbon hydrogen production, and these are 5 of the key ones supported by that competition. And as you can see, there's a mix of green and blue, a mix of wind and other types of hydrogen production. And I guess one of the interesting ones for Morocco is probably Project Dolphin. This is a pilot for floating offshore wind hydrogen production. These platforms have, a wind turbine, they've got an electrolyzer, and they've got solar panels to power the desalination pump. So ERMs is working on that one. That could be a model or something that Morocco might find interesting. But you've got other projects like HyNet, and I'll show you some more detail on that shortly, which integrate sort of green hydrogen from offshore wind, fixed offshore wind, blue hydrogen, CCUS, the infrastructure, all that sort of stuff. And Gigastack, which is purely green hydrogen, and hopefully you've heard of ITM Power, one of the UK's leading electrolyzer companies, and they're working on that Gigastack project. Interestingly, ITM Power also recently launched a collaboration with its European partners, Ørsted and Siemens, and also another UK company called I think it's Pure Energy, Element Energy, to pilot a different sort of floating offshore wind electrolysis capability commissioned by the European Union. So there's still that cross-border collaboration going on between the UK and the EU, and a recognition that the UK has some really strong capabilities that the European Union needs to utilise, as we all need to utilise to help achieve our goals. Next slide, please. So this is one of the ones I mentioned, Gigastack. It's just a pictorial representation, but you've got offshore wind farm. I think that's a fixed one, but clearly there's a lot of development going on with floating offshore wind as well. And Ørsted, that's an Ørsted capability, matched up with an ITM Power electrolyzer plant to produce the hydrogen, and then feeding that to the Philips refinery or an industrial cluster. So that's an example of that's coupling the world's largest offshore wind farm with the largest emitting industrial zone in the UK at scale. So exciting project there. Perhaps some stuff that could be replicated or collaborated with Morocco on. Next slide, please. this is perhaps less relevant, or maybe my naive view of the Moroccan renewable energy landscape, but this is a blue hydrogen project led by Equinor in the UK. So natural gas powered, but developing a CCUS and hydrogen pipeline infrastructure where CCUS is piped one way, where hydrogen is piped one way to the industry and carbon dioxide is piped the other way into an empty natural gas field in under the North Sea. Next slide, please. This is HyNet, so a really integrated system full of lots of different types of hydrogen use and production. Again, it's going to involve blue hydrogen with CCUS, but you can see also there's the green renewable hydrogen from offshore wind, which would be integrated into the system. Hydrogen used to power transport, rail, etc. Blending in the gas grid, because we hope if the tests go well, we could power homes heating and home cooking through hydrogen as well and help decarbonize in that way. Also to industry, CO2 storage and salt cavern storage as well, of course, which is important for the storage of hydrogen. Next slide, please. So I guess those are some projects. That's what's happening so far. This just gives you a sort of a flavour of the ecosystem, some of the companies that could be part of collaborations between the UK and Morocco on this. Whilst you have under blue hydrogen, you have companies like Johnson Matthey. It's a really interesting company because they're also doing the membranes and the catalysts which are needed for electrolysis as well. Green hydrogen, intelligent energy, I've mentioned ITM Power, Renewable Energy, Johnson Matthey again. In the storage side, those companies there. Distribution side, fuel cell systems, EDF Energy, Northern Gas Networks, etc. So that's to do with the gas grid. And the applications, so many of them perhaps a little bit further off, but some are up and running. We've got hydrogen buses running on the UK already. JCB are developing hydrogen excavators, etc., etc. Next slide, please. And yes, so I mean, I left this in from another presentation I did, but the demand side is coming on quickly. And of course, Morocco, which has ambitions to export its hydrogen, will be interested. We'll be keeping close track on what the uses of your hydrogen exports would be, and of course looking to utilize these solutions in Morocco as well. So there's some really interesting research and development going on in the UK on this. The first commercial hydrogen fueled aircraft, rail, you've got the Hydroflex train, and the UK we think will develop quite a strong capability on retrofitting trains. So those that are powered by different means at the moment could be retrofitted to be powered on hydrogen. Hydrogen cars, hydrogen buses I mentioned, Wrightbus are already putting hydrogen powered buses on UK roads. Construction, excavators, heating, hydrogen powered boilers or hydrogen ready boilers are being developed, and also ferries with hydrogen power as well. So I think that might be the last slide I had on hydrogen. I'm not an expert in the solar side of things, nor the grid side of things, but I did ask some colleagues what they would say, what Moroccan industry might be interested in. So just to give a bit of a flag that the UK has some solar capabilities around the designing and implementing of policy, the development and delivery and ownership models, and the finance around that. So maybe there's some collaboration opportunities there, the development of medium scale solar projects, general design, engineering and construction, and I understand there'll need to be some significant development around trying to integrate solar power into hydrogen production, etc. Next slide, please. Some of the companies involved, UK companies involved, I won't go through these, mostly because I'm not very familiar with them, but I think we'll make these slides available for circulation. So and I have colleagues who can put you in touch with the right people if you want to get in touch with me afterwards about this. Next slide, please. And also on the electrical networks capability. So again, I'm told by colleagues, much of the world uses sort of the UK as a kind of a benchmark or use UK standards for grids, especially in Africa. There's going to be maintenance requirements which the UK can help with for aging grids. Investment in smart grids and regulatory leadership are key strengths of the UK as well. And if we go to the next slide, these are some companies that are based in the UK, not all UK owned, but have big presences in the UK to take advantage of UK capabilities. And I think that's my last slide. So next slide, please. Yes. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found that interesting and useful. I mean, I would close by saying there are both the UK and Morocco have big ambitions with hydrogen. I think the UK can be a market for Moroccan green hydrogen and also a source of technology and expertise. So there's some great scope for collaboration here. There's big appetite in the UK for working with Moroccan companies and Moroccan government on developing your projects. So I really hope that we can help to get involved and deliver those. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Josh. That's great, and we've had some really interesting follow-up questions, which I'll point your way after this. But let me invite Malik to come in now and share a bit of learning and reflections of a success story of a British company who has come to Morocco and succeeded. They're called Windhoist. Over to you, Malik. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen. Karim, can you put the first slide on, please? Thank you, Karim. Thank you for the promotion of your slide. I'm General Manager of Windhoist Morocco, representing this group in Morocco and indeed in the region for the last 8 years. Indeed, a success story for Windhoist. Windhoist is world leader in the installation, erection, electrification of wind turbine. So I will explain in the next slides the role of Windhoist in Morocco. Next slide, please. So this is the details of the overview I'll be through in the next 2 slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Windhoist is based in Scotland, near Glasgow. Windhoist was originally a family-owned company. Dan McNally started in the crane business, actually. And saw the opportunity when the wind energy started in the world. He needed to use the cranes that they have, and that's when the company created, and his son Ali took over for the last 20 years or so. He was managing the group, and the company was sold in 2019. Windhoist Limited was sold to an investment fund in London specializing in infrastructure, in the financing of infrastructure projects around the world. A little bit of history about the group. Next slide, please. So Windhoist started very quickly in the wind industry to help the turbine manufacturers install the turbines. And as you see in this slide, they work with the main ones, especially Siemens, the GE, Gamesa, since its wind energy division to Siemens, and it's now Siemens Gamesa, which means that the Windhoist Maroc works very closely with the local subsidiary of Siemens Gamesa called SGRE, Siemens Gamesa Renewable Energy. And I am personally in regular contact with them because most projects were done with them. And The blades are today, as you mentioned, coming from the Siemens Gamesa factory in the north of Morocco. So it's additional integration in the wind projects in Morocco. So as I mentioned earlier, Windhoist is a world leader in installation, erection, electrification of wind turbines. So they have all the plant required for the heavy lifting of the turbines, the blades, the installation. And they do the training of the local technicians, and this is one of the successes of Windhoist in Morocco, is that they were able to find the right people in the country, because the aim from the start has always been to hire Moroccan technicians and train them for this very specialized work. To the point that they were even sent to the UK for the training. Windhoist has a training center, and they have all the required skills from the turbine manufacturers. Next slide. These are the features of the cranes that Windhoist show you the expertise that they developed. Next slide, please. One, please. So of course, Windhoist was the highest standards in the industry, with the HSE as a key factor in its operations. Very conscious of protection of the environment. They have all the modern types of available. They have the management required. We were able to hire a project manager in Morocco a few years ago, which was a first. But for the first wind farm projects, the managers were coming from the UK, from head office. In addition to the local expertise that has been developed over the years, Windhoist had to bring technicians from not only the UK but other countries in Europe to help with the projects during the life of the project, on and off, in addition to subcontractors in Morocco and outside Morocco. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, Windhoist Morocco was established in 2013. It was established originally at the very request of Siemens at the time, when Siemens won the contract to develop the 300 megawatt Tarfaya wind farm in the south. And it was a project won by the local Siemens, and therefore Siemens insisted from their main subcontractor Windhoist to have a local operation. And Windhoist was introduced to me by the then British Consul General, as I was shown to the consulate and to the commercial section already. And it was a win-win partnership for me, my firm here, and Windhoist over the years. I have been very much involved on the financial side, of course, the accounting side, and also in the human resources side, the commercial side, and the technical side being handled directly by head office. So this slide now shows the first project, which was a milestone for Windhoist in Morocco. 131 Siemens turbines for the joint venture created by with the Suez Group. Nareva is, I assume, already known to some of the panelists. It's the renewable energy subsidiary of the Almada group, one of the major holding companies in this country. And at the time of construction, it was the largest wind project in Africa. So the first turbine was installed in October 2013, the final turbine in August 2014. It was completed ahead of time. So this is a major success for Windhoist in Morocco, which helped Windhoist develop further business, not only with Siemens, but also with Gamesa at the time, before their wind operation was acquired by Siemens, and also with the GE. So here is a list of projects that have been realized to date. The vision of the then CEO Hugh McNally was to consider Morocco as a hub, and the second project was across the border in the south, in Nouakchott, in Mauritania. It was very complicated logistically to transport the crane, the equipment, the people in another, but we were able to do it. It was another success story in Mauritania. And the next projects were all done in Morocco. There's been a lot of work for Windhoist since. I'm familiar with GE, again with Siemens, for the wholly owned subsidiary of Nareva Éolienne du Maroc. And the last one, which has just been completed, is Midet. And this is the first one, interestingly, that was the wind program of the Moroccan National Board for Electricity and Water, ONEE. Among the key factors Windhoist's success in Morocco was the close cooperation with UKTI, as it was called at that time, DIT today, and the British Chamber. As I mentioned earlier, the local expertise, local support, and also my own involvement in creation of the company here. Also, the integration with the management brought by Windhoist from head office and the local employees. There haven't been any issues whatsoever in the cooperation. On the contrary, it has been a success, and I was involved personally with it in training the local staff that was hired. And Windhoist invested a lot originally in bringing equipment from the UK, in purchase of new cranes specializing in wind farm projects in desert terrain in the south. And now in this slide, this is just to explain the involvement of UKTI, DIT today, that Windhoist had a lot of advantages to establish itself in Morocco. First and foremost, because there is a very strong renewable, very active renewable energy strategy in this country, and also that it is a very safe country to work in. The very old and long-standing and strong links with the EU in general, and with the UK in particular. Next slide, please. So this is just a few words about my own firm, Ethics Consulting. As Hugh McNally felt confident, we created the company to involve me personally and a delegated management contract to local subsidiary instead of bringing a permanent expat team here, which would have cost obviously more money. And it has been very rewarding to me personally, and I am very grateful to Windhoist for the trust. Next slide, please. So this was an opportunity for Windhoist also for jobs, not only but also from the UK and other European countries. People were hired especially for the various wind farm projects to work here. And the conclusion, it is a story indeed, and I hope personally that there will be more projects going forward. Tenders being considered at the moment. Windhoist is very busy in the EU, especially in the Nordic countries, project in France, and in the UK there is a major offshore project, the which is being realized by the hoist at the moment. And
Alec, I think we've lost you there for a minute. Perhaps it's the connection, but I think you were just nearing the end of your presentation anyway. So perhaps let's move on to the Q&A, and then when I come back to you for questions, if there is anything that you still wanted to say, then we can give you the opportunity then. But thank you, if you can hear us. Thank you very much indeed for setting all that out. As I said, it'll be good to come back to you shortly. So let's move on to the Q&A, and thanks again to participants for sending us through some questions. We've had some really great ones. Maybe I can start by posing one to you, Mr. Moulin, from the Moroccan side. And I guess it's really, where do you think international partners for Morocco, and I guess let's focus on, say, the UK partners for Morocco, can really come and add value and partner with Morocco on your journey under renewables, under energy efficiency, etc. And what is the best way for us to do that? How should we engage with you? How should we link up our expertise and companies with yourselves? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, and I would like to also mention what Mr. Laurent said, and it's amazing what's going on also in the UK, and it's really interesting on that. Thank you very much. But why we decided to have this cluster on green hydrogen is to have the link between the public and the private sector, but also with all partners. And that's why I think the first point will be, I didn't mention that we have 3 pilot projects, one developed with OCP for green ammonia, one developed with Mazen for 100 megawatt of green hydrogen for storage, and also with Irizen in Benguiri, another project, how to work on hydrogen on all the applications. We saw all the applications, not only for the short term, linked to the industry, feedstock, export, but also on the grid stability, on the heavy truck, on the public transport, on the railway, maritime. So you look at all the applications, huge opportunities for the future. But how we can start right now is we have this cluster. You can contact this cluster. That's the first point. And that's why, and in this cluster, we have different commissions dedicated to all. One is dedicated to partnership. I'm involved in with Mazen. So we'll be able to discuss all the points, specific points on any project, on how we can work together to look at who will be the best partner also. So we are organized for that. So please don't hesitate. You can contact directly Ame, and they will transfer to the green the cluster green hydrogen. So we are really a team today working all together for that. So that's one of the reasons why we created the cluster.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And maybe just to stay with you, Mr. Moulin, for one more question, because we've had a couple on this theme, and it's around, I guess, legislation and the regulatory environment and stuff that governments like yours can create to encourage and support companies to be successful here. And someone's asked specifically about Law 13.9 around energy into medium voltage grids and things like that, and you mentioned some specific legislation in your opening remarks. So are you able to say a bit more about how the Moroccan government side and your agency are working on the legislative and regulatory side of all of this? Thanks.
That's also key. Why we decided in the strategy to have in the beginning also with the institutions the legal framework. The legal framework, we should look at where we came from. There were complete monopoly for electricity before. It's because of renewable energy that we managed to open the market. And when we look at the, we heard from Windhost and Mr. Nabi what he said about the project, we had completely private projects. And we can have completely private projects linked to renewables today in Morocco. Of course, not everything is open. We are working on that to change, and there's a discussion right now on legislation for the mid-tension to have access, because the mission of the AME, of the Moroccan Agency today for the green economy, we are becoming the Moroccan Agency for the Green Economy, is to decarbonize. If we want to decarbonize the industry, we have to facilitate all the legal points for any industrial to have access to this green energy, to this green, all this, and the investment for that. So legal framework is very important. That's why we are pushing right now on 2 laws, one dedicated to the law on renewable energy and to open the market, and the second one on the auto production law. It's how we can develop your own production with the renewables. And of course, that's, I think, also it's the next level to achieve as a possibility for helping and facilitating projects in this field. It's underway. And now, as I mentioned, we have this green economy department in the government and is pushing for that.
Thank you very much, Said. Maybe if I could turn to Josh and ask a question, a similar sort of question, but could you give us a bit more of a sense of how the British government is helping and could help in the future green energy projects, both in the UK but internationally with partners like Morocco, and this could be around subsidies or other non-financial forms of support. Are you able to say a bit about that, please? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I suppose the first thing to mention is the recent announcement by the UK government to up its ambitions when it comes to green and clean energy and decarbonisation. So I think they've just announced that we will aim to cut emissions by I think it's 55% by from 1990 levels by 2035. Don't quote me on that. It's in the news though, if you want to have a look. So it's, firstly, it's a question of ambition, and the UK government is putting those ambitions high. There's a big question mark over the pathway to achieving that, but with the sort of institutions that the UK has put in place to try and guide us, then we're giving ourselves the biggest chance. So I mentioned already the Climate Change Committee, who are an independent organisation, and they are setting out carbon budgets, what needs to happen by private citizens as well as government and business, and the regulatory framework in order for us to reasonably meet those ambitions. Of course, it's then on the government to adopt policies to help influence that. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, the UK's, like it sounds like Morocco is doing, is taking sort of quite a private sector focused way. We're trying to make targeted interventions through business models, through regulation, through standards, etc., which will incentivize both companies and then also through policy to get individuals to change their behavior. And there needs to be that pairing, really, sort of getting businesses to adapt. And so I suppose one of the key policies that was one of the key tools and mechanisms that was announced recently is around support for fuel switching. So what can government do to get industry to switch from fossil fuels or high carbon fuels to lower carbon fuels, and that cuts across all sectors. So yeah, I suppose it's a mix is what I'd say, policy, individual behavioural change, and you kind of need to take that overall approach. But of course, there's also going to need to be some grant funding for specific pilot projects. A lot of the technology in this is proven, it's demonstrated, we know it works, but we need to see how it's going to be scaled up, how the cost is going to come down, and that's going to involve some R&D, and there is lots of funding that the UK is offering. For example, the Bayes hydrogen supply competition that's now closed but is ongoing, and the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund, which is going to be consulted on and published this year or next. I can't remember the date, but those sorts of funding competitions will help and help stimulate industry to decarbonize. And lastly, the UK has an organisation called UKRI, UK Research and Innovation, and a part of that's called Innovate UK, and that looks at, and I suppose this speaks to your question, Daniel, about how that interacts with other countries as well. You know, a lot of this innovation needs to take place in partnership. You know, no one country can solve the problems of decarbonisation. So it's going to need countries like the UK and Morocco to work together to solve these, and the research funding can do that, getting different companies together, academic institutions together to try and tackle some of these problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Morocco has its own research agency in this area, IRIZEN, which was mentioned earlier. And Mr. Moulin, you might like to say a bit about potential partnerships maybe between our research organizations. But let me ask a similar question, because this is something that Malik said was really important. And this is about skills and training of human capital in these areas. And so we've had a specific question, which is, are there strategies to identify the skills required in this sector, and initiatives underway to plan courses and training and stuff like that? So maybe I can come to you first, Saeed, with that question. Thank you.
Excuse me. Yeah. About I would like to understand the point is linked to the incentives, or?
Forgive me, yes, I threw two questions at you. I think one question was about the potential for partnerships between our research developments in this area, in hydrogen, for example. And then a second question around the skills and education that would be required for
capacity building. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Well, that's why in our cluster we have a commission dedicated to that. One dedicated to R&D and IRIZEN, as I mentioned, and other actors, because OCP was also following on specifically on green ammonia, and Mazen also on all the storage linked to green hydrogen. So, and to production of the green hydrogen with the renewables. So for each sector, you'll have the partner. But for R&D, that's why we have this commission dedicated for that. So they will be the partner, I think, with any actor in this field in UK. And the second point about capacity building, that's also very important. And that's why I believe that many opportunities today, what we did for the wind sector is we 500 young people, young Moroccans, went to Denmark for working on the blade factory. And today we have a blade factory in Tangier. I think when I mentioned that we can have creating jobs in the north and in the south, it's really linked to that. We can think about how we can have all this part linked to training, to capacity building in this field and with universities. And that's why we have also all the commission dedicated to that also on the cluster. As I mentioned, we looked at all the commissions, and in each commissions, one are linked to R&D, some are on partnership, one commission dedicated to capacity building, and that's a key also because we have time. As I mentioned, we have a short-term project, but we have long-term project, but we should start right now.
Thanks very much for that answer. And
staying on the cluster, we have many universities also involved today in the cluster. Many universities, and I think it's a key also because if we want this training in this field and the capacity building in this field, it's also linked also to the universities.
Yeah, I mean, I really agree on that point, and the UK and Morocco already have some really successful partnerships between its education institutions, and particularly between its universities and higher education. And there's no reason why that can't be across a number of sectors, including this one. So I very much agree with that. I wanted to return to Malik because you in your presentation listed a load of really helpful lessons that you found made your project particularly successful, education and capacity building being one of them, of course. But I wondered for British companies who are seeking to set out on potential partnerships with and in Morocco, what would be your key bit of advice that you would give to someone at the start of the journey which you undertook yourself? Thank you.
And understand culture, understand the local people where they come from. There is a lot of young people who are really eager to learn, who have the basis, and the Windhoist people who came and who trained them were able to interact very quickly with them. And also the company made a big effort to send some of these technicians to the training center in the UK. From there, you mentioned Denmark. Some of them even went to Denmark from the UK. It's amazing the investment that Windhoist has been able to put in developing the local skills. And personally, I will emphatically supporting that with the general management of Windhoist, and I think that made a big success because these local people also knew their communities very well, and they were able locally, especially in the south of the country, because you had Tarfaya, Arpenir, Aftisat between Bushdur and Dakhla, even deeper south, and these people to help, with the nitty-gritty details on a daily basis to make sure that everyone saw the project from a logistical point of view, and that was fantastic. And many of them had good English. You'd be surprised. And some of them had to develop the language skills, and they made the effort. And that was excellent, and it worked both ways. And it was the key to the success, to make sure that the local people were able to understand the corporate culture and understand the business, and it created quite opportunities for the local people and also the local subcontractors, because the objective was also to use as many local subcontractors as possible, not to bring people from abroad, companies from abroad. So that's what I can say.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much indeed for that answer, Malik. Look, I think we're slowly running out of time, and I'd like to ask one final question to Stephen Orr in his capacity as president of BritCham. But just before I do, let me open the floor to the panel for any final comments or remarks or anything, not compulsory, but anything else you might want to add before we wrap up.
I think nothing from me, Daniel.
Okay. Mr. Moulin, any final remarks?
Yeah, well, I'm sure this is also a new opportunity for the partnership between Morocco and UK. And I think, I believe that this is new opportunity, not only for our generation, for the next generation also. And knowing what's going on right now, and knowing how we saw all the opportunities, all the experiences already done in this field, not only in UK, but also in Morocco, we believe that we have now here a huge opportunity for not only for the public sector, but for the private sector, to work together for reaching all those objectives for or goals for climate change.
Thank you very much indeed. Malik, any other words from you?
Yes, personally, considering the future of wind energy in Morocco and beyond Morocco, I can wish that the future tenders will be successful and that Windhoist will continue operating to build on the reputation they have already acquired in this country, and with the likes of Siemens and GE especially, but also with the project owners. I know Nareva personally, and Windhoist has a good reputation that are a preferred subcontractor. And I also hope that the hub strategy, personally, I've always believed in it for having for a long time. The hub strategy can be developed because there will be wind projects in the region in the years to come. And I know that for a fact. So that's what I can say. But I cannot comment on hydrogen and solar because Windhoist is not really in those sectors. So they specialize in wind farm projects for the installation. They are closely associated with manufacturers. That's what I can say.
No, thank you very much, and that's well understood. And actually, you know, an important point that of course we focused a lot on hydrogen today, but you know, the British government and I know the Moroccan government are absolutely focused on the whole of the renewable energy sector. And what I'd say in closing is to our audience, if you want to follow up, if you want to get in touch, we'd be delighted to speak to you more about any of this. And I know Bricham will circulate contact details afterwards, so please do feel free to get in touch and follow up. But maybe I could hand back to President Stephen Orr for the final word, and maybe with a question, Stephen. It'd be great to just get a sense from you of how Bricham can play a role in all of this and how you can help British companies enter the Moroccan market. But over to you to conclude. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a fantastic webinar, and thank you very much to all of the speakers. Obviously, very knowledgeable people, some who I've met and some who I look forward to meeting. You can see that this is a sector that's sponsored, as Saeed Moulin said, from the very highest level of state. And the same goes for the UK as well in terms of the Prime Minister and how they're pushing forward. And we hear that they're upping their targets now to drive faster and further. So that's great. But the biggest interest to me this morning was actually the Windhoist side of things, which shows that, you know, if you're not into making just pure hydrogen or pure wind, there is a huge amount of opportunity that circles around this sector in terms of providing opportunities in business, both for Morocco and the UK, whether it's technology or whether it's manufacturing capability. And the Chamber of Commerce is always here to help. We are here to work with everybody that's interested in doing business in Morocco from the UK or vice versa, and to help people understand what's it like to do business in Morocco, what are the barriers of entry, how we can help to remove those barriers of entry. So we're available, I would say 24/7. I'm sure my team will be banging their heads on the table when I say we're 24/7, but we're very, very available and very happy to make all of the connections necessary to help you install in Morocco and move forward. So great webinar, thank you again. Just mention a quick support again to our partners for OCP, Spirit, Bank of Africa, Maro Clear, Consumar and CIH Bank, and Dan for yourself as well for hosting this webinar and bringing this together. It's great.
Thanks everyone. Good afternoon.
Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.